Welcome to Wisdom from the Aerial View, the podcast for those who wish to learn how to crush their anxiety and find meaning and purpose in their lives. Good morning. I am joined today by two very attractive men. Lucky me. So you all know, those of you who have been listening to our show now, we're probably nominated for Golden Globe this weekend for podcasts. By the way, they're giving Golden Globes podcasts now. So you know Dr. Mark Klein. Dr. Mark Klein and I do this every week. But today we're joined by a friend of mine, and his name is Steve Muscato. Let me tell you just a little bit about Steve. He's a son of Illinois, went to school in Iowa, and now lives in Tennessee. So he's been all over the place in the middle of the country, not on the East Coast, but we'll accept that. Steve, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you.
It's great to be here.
One of the things I love to do, Mark knows this, and Mark does this too. We like to have, I don't want to have just friends that are mine. I want to share my friends. So I said to Mark, I'd like to share with you my friend Steve. Let me just briefly say, I met Steve many years ago when I was working at the Meals on Wheels Association of America. How did I meet Steve? Steve worked in corporate America. Am I allowed to say who you worked for, Steve?
Sure.
He was a big shot at Bridgestone. And of course, those are tires, those are wheels, Meals on Wheels, Bridgestone. What a great company they were very generous to us. And Steve, who ran a huge department over there, became a very close friend of mine, and I adore him. And I said, this is a man who understands a lot of things in life. And I know I'm going overboard, but let me just read this, Mark, if I might, and tell you a little bit about what Steve wrote. Steve and I have been talking about aging because Meals on Wheels is for people who are older adults. So we've been talking about aging for years. And he wrote something interesting. He wrote, aging doesn't automatically lead to significance. In leadership, and I want to spend a lot of time today talking about leadership, time passes whether we're intentional or not. Years add up. Experience stacks up. Titles and responsibilities get bigger. But many leaders discover something unsettling. They're aging, but they're not sure they're becoming more significant, unsure that time alone is doing the deeper work they hoped it would. That tension is worth paying attention to. Significance doesn't come simply from passing time in the position. It comes from what we do with the seasons we're given. It asks different questions than success does. And I wanted the two of you to get together because I think in many respects, you think the same way. So that's this very long introduction. And one of the other things you talk about is perspective, presence, and meaning. So let's dive in. Mark, you know what? This is crazy, but Mark, go ahead. You start. Ask the first question. Go ahead. Let me put you on the spot. Go ahead.
So I met Steve about 5 minutes ago, and I already like the guy. So he has, it's clear we're on the same wavelength. I think this will be a very interesting discussion. You know, you hadn't read to me before what you just read for all our listeners. Of course not, right? Good. Steve, by the way, she doesn't tell me anything, right? So it's always a surprise. At any rate, I think that was so well written and so thoughtful. I thought we could have a hallelujah or an amen after that because it was so poignant. That the way you described aging and that success is not the same as having a meaningful life. So I would like to start by asking Steve, what has motivated you to focus on the issues you're spending time on right now? And you should actually tell the listeners that you also have a podcast. So when they get done with us, they can immediately transfer over to yours. But why don't you tell us what you're focused on now at this point in your career, in your life?
Oh, wow. Well, what I'm focusing on right now, as I wrote and as we're talking about, is significance. We get to a point in our lives where what we've done just isn't cutting it anymore. So I read a book about a year ago called Halftime by Bob Buford. It's a book basically talks about that gap between success and significance, the things that you built in your life. So this is your work, this is your family, this is all that stuff. It gets to a point where you just want more. You want more significance. You want to matter. You want what you do to mean something to yourself and to others. And so, as I've been working with leaders in the marketing and strategy space, I keep coming back to the leaders who are struggling with that very same thing. They're like, "Hey, I built this great company, but I just need to be, more intentional about being, really doing things that matter." So that's a space that my own life journey has taken. As Enid had said, I've come from corporate America doing corporate America things. I started my own business, had to start over. And now it's just, I'm to this point in my life where I just want to matter as well. And not in a give me an award type of space, but just I want to do things that are intentionally significant and meaningful to others. So,
Okay, that's a really good place to jump off from, because what I like to do, and Enid knows, is I like to dig down a couple of layers from the surface. Well, like why things are. I become this ridiculous iconoclast in my life. Starting out from the kid who always colored between the lines and never did anything really that anybody would raise their eyebrows about, to getting to the point where I think most conventional wisdom is wrong. It's almost always wrong. And digging down a little bit to find out why things are. So unfortunately, you've landed in my sweet spot right now. So why do you think that you want to find meaning, or as you described it, significance, wanting to matter? Why do you think you are motivated to do that?
I think it's human nature that we, and especially as we add up the years and we realize that there's less of them coming, that we want to make sure that our time is spent wisely. And so I'm to the point in my life where people my age, my people are getting cancer. They're dying. Parents are dying. You look at the news, our childhood heroes are the musicians that we listen. I mean, it's all disappearing. And so we get to this point in our lives where I think we look differently at our own mortality. And it's like, okay, I want to make sure that I end strong. I want to really lean into why I was put on this earth. So I think it's natural for us to want to go deeper and to do things that really matter. I mean, we have time constraints. I want to make sure that the things that I'm doing is worth my time, basically.
So what I find fascinating about this is that you said it's human nature to want to matter, to want to do things of significance. But what exactly, and I'm not putting you on the spot, this is a great jumping off point for what we talk about all the time. So you've discovered this, we've focused on this at this point in your life. And you said we have a limited number of days. There's only so many days we have in our life. And especially now that you're getting closer to the end, they're looking at you. I don't think you're anywhere near the end. So I think you got a really long way to go. So, because you look very young. So I would say that, how would you have would it have been an advantage to you or to anybody, we can focus on you, to have had this realization 30 years ago, or I don't know how old you are, but 30, 40 years ago, whatever. Because that was the truth then also, by the way. You had a certain number of days on this earth. You had no idea what they are. Now all of a sudden it's becoming, you're realizing it more because you look in the mirror and you go, I'm not 16 anymore. But would that have made a difference to you had you had this appreciation, or had somebody helped explain this to you earlier in your life? You think it would have made any difference?
No, I don't, because stupidity is what we do when we're young. I would have ruined it. I would have totally blown it. I think we need to get to a point where we have to realize, I valued a lot different things when I was younger. So I don't think that I would have appreciated the wisdom that I would have had when I was 16 or 25 or 30. So I think I had to get to this point. I had to go through those experiences and see them, not just to live through them, but to reframe them. So I look at your book. The whole idea of the book is to rise up to the area of you, to really reframe what you went through and see it for what it was. So I'm looking back in my life now, and I'm looking at those experiences that I thought were really bad, really negative, and I realized that no, those had to happen. And because of that season I was in, I learned so much that allowed me to move into the next season with a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more refinement, so I can build from that and really craft the next season of my life, which is aligning myself with what I feel is my purpose.
You know, it's interesting. You're talking about seasons, and we've been on this podcast for about a year now, talking about moments and time. And we had a podcast not that long ago with Dr. Ellen Langer, and she talked about moments.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about seasons, and it's the same thing. We're really talking basically about the same thing. But one of the things that I loved about you when I met you, yes, you were in the corporate world, but you also did something else while you were doing that. You were a volunteer. Not only did your company give us money, and a lot of money, and that was great, but you said, no, that's not enough. I want to do something personally. And you did volunteer work. And I think to this day, you're still doing that, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And why? Tell us why you do that. I mean, you've got a very busy schedule. You're looking at things. You're wondering about your future. And I know that your mom is living with you. And I know she's not doing that well. And that confronts you every single day.
Right.
And yet you take the time, you take the effort, and you go and volunteer. How come you do that?
Yeah. It goes back to one of my favorite quotes from Ram Dass. We're just here to walk each other home. We're all on this journey. You know, we have different paths to take, but at the end of the day, we're all going to the same place, hopefully. And life is hard. Life is hard for many people. And I look at my life, I'm like, okay, I have nothing to complain about. It could be a lot worse. And if I can just help someone make it through another day or bring them a smile, it does more for me. I mean, we've heard that a lot of times, like the volunteers are the ones who really get out of it. But it's true where it really helps me in my perspective. It helps to ground me and to know that I've made a human connection. So that's really what motivates me to do that. And so back when I was there to present a really big check physically and with the numbers on it, I had no skin in the game. I didn't raise that money. I was the guy who presented you a check. Yes, I was part of the team who created the programs, who connected with the people who donated the money. I mean, so I was a part of it, but it wasn't me. So that was the disconnect. So I got to present that check, and then the next day I went back and I actually served a meal to a senior, and that's what brought it all home. That what took those dollars and made it real, and it personally connected me to the mission.
You know, there are two topics that you just mentioned that I want to get to. One of them is what you just said, that when volunteers or somebody, when you do something for somebody else, I love that phrase, walking everybody, each person home. But when you do something, we talk about this probably every week, that the greatest source of joy you can have in your life is when you successfully help someone else. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
And I always say, you know, it's in a way selfish, because once you do it, you realize how great you feel and you want to do it again. Being a physician for many years, I think I've told Enid knows, I've seen over 100,000 patients personally, face to face.
Wow.
And so I've talked to every one of them, maybe for a minute, maybe for 15 minutes, whatever. It doesn't matter. I've never for a minute, but I've talked to a lot of people. And when you help someone, a physician, you have a great opportunity. You can help somebody every day if you're willing to put the littlest bit of effort into it, to care, to show that you're there to help them, not just to fill out a form and get a paycheck. Then once you do this, it's an addiction, right? You love it. It's like, oh my God, I feel so great. And so you do it more and more and more. So that's the first thing. The other thing, so I want you to expand on that in a minute. The other thing I want to talk about, maybe we'll start with this one, is you said something super interesting to me. So I asked you, if you had known this earlier in your life, would you have made a difference? And you said flat out, no. And I thought, great. And then you said, because I had to go through all these experiences. And this is another thing we talk about. Life, in a way, is peculiar when you stop and think about it, that we'd be much better off being smart when we're young than when we're old. Because if we were smart when we're young, we wouldn't jump off of cliffs, we wouldn't drive 100 miles an hour, we wouldn't smoke cigarettes or vape. We might have, but we'd certainly be aware, and we might do a lot less of it. Accidents used to be the number one cause of death among adolescents. Now, unfortunately, it's suicide, I think. But still, we'd be a lot better off if we were smarter when we're young. But we're not. We're smartest when we're near the end. In fact, unless you get dementia, and I'm not even sure I'm not sure what happens when you get dementia, but I think you learn right to the end. You're the smartest probably on the last day of your life. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of survival of the fittest. Right. So it is very interesting that we're required to go through these experiences that you so eloquently described. We have to do this. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that why experiences are so important in making this evolution. Let's start with that, and then we'll go back to one of our favorite topics that you talked about is feeling so good when you help people. So let's talk a little bit about experience. In your personal life, as you watch yourself make this evolution, because you have made an evolution, that's really what you're talking about. Let's talk a little about, tell us about the experiences in your life that really molded you and kept moving you forward, that in retrospect, you can actually see. Is that a fair question?
It's a tough one.
Yeah. Well, you asked about, why we have to go through these seasons. I think without going through them and experiencing them, we tend to stay, as you put it in the book and the podcast, in the inward view. So those experiences and the seasons allow us to interact with others and in situations that help force us to take the outward view. So I'm going into a season in my own way, but whatever happens, it affects me in a way that brings in different viewpoints and different opinions and people and other experiences. It kind of changes it. If I just went into a season and not had everything affect me, those experiences, I don't think I would learn out of that, right?
And you're now working with other people to get them to. You're working with leaders, right? And that's what you're doing. And you're working with. What's the issue that they are having? If I can say problems with, what is it that you're spiritually leading them on what path? What is it that why do they come to you?
Well, it's not specifically spiritually. If they are spiritual, great. And if they're not, it opens the door to a conversation. But that's not the intent. Yes, I work with leaders. It's typically in the realm of, hey, let's get my marketing and my strategy all put together. We do that, but then it's like, hey, can I talk to you? Yeah. And that leads into I can't tell anybody this, but I really don't feel like I know what I'm doing here. That imposter syndrome comes in,
right.
And that permeates beyond the boardroom. It goes into their lives. And so that's where they are feeling something and they really don't know how to express it. When you're at the top, you really don't have a lot of close advisors. The people who come into your office are the yes men and women. They tell you what you want to hear, and you can't get a straight answer and you can't be open and honest. So who do they have to talk to? And so what I do is I come in and we do talk about the significance. So what we do on the business side, which is aligning your business, your marketing, your teams, your strategy to the mission of the organization, we can do that with ourselves as well. I mean, what's your mission? What's your purpose? And then that goes into the alignment of, is everything in your life aligning to what you say is important to you?
And that's what I meant about spiritual. That's what I meant. Yeah.
So spiritually, yes. Are you aligned with who God wanted you to be? If you're not, there's still alignment that needs to happen. So going back to the very beginning of our podcast here, we're talking about health and wellness. Well, I'm looking at my mother. I'm looking at older people who can't pick anything up, who, are with canes and stuff. It's like, I'm not going to be like that. My viewpoint is I want to be healthy healthy enough to do whatever I want, so I can be free to do whatever I want, no matter how old I am. So I lift heavy things in the morning, not because I want to, but because that's in alignment to what I want, what I think is significant in my life.
I just want to comment on this, on that particular point. I think everybody should exercise as often as they can. I do the same thing. I exercise almost every day. I think people should do what they can, as little as they can, like lift weights, do hard things, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. But I can tell you can do everything right, and it will increase the probability that you'll stay healthy and we'll be able to pick up things and do what you said. But a lot of this is out of your control.
Right.
And so I have friends who are getting, none of them are super duper old, but are lamenting the fact that they can't do this and they can't do that. And some of them have not taken care of themselves and having a whole lot of trouble. And they're not really old enough to be having that much trouble because they didn't take care of themselves. But some people have, and even then they can't. So I don't think we can rely on our physical bodies. I like to say, Enid heard me say this, that there is this mind-body connection, of course, or this, as Dr. Langer would say, a mind-body unity. She doesn't like the word connection, but I would say, yes, that's true, very true. But your mind and your body are not necessarily the best of friends, right? And your body is a good chance will let you down at some point. So we can't really rely on that. We should I agree with you, do everything you can, but you can't rely on it. You talk to these executives about meaning and purpose and why they're here and aligning all these things together. Why do you think we're here?
Well, that's a deep question.
Well, it's a deep podcast.
It is a deep podcast. Obviously we always ask ourselves this question at different times in our lives, the good times, the bad times. I think why we are here is really just to have a human experience. It is to be with the other 3 billion people in this world and interact in a way that really just provides meaning. Life and creation has its own science and chemistry, and the fact that we are one little planet and there's an unfathomable vast universe out there, it just points to the fact that we're here for a very short time with these people, and we're just supposed to interact and make a difference and really just have relationships with people, with creation, with God, if we are into that. Really, it's just to find meaning, find purpose, and to connect with others, I think.
The reason I ask you is because, let me ask you this question. We've lost Enid for a minute. I'm sure she'll be back. But so now you're stuck with me for a few minutes. So that implies that you do believe that, that there is meaning. There's two choices. Either we're here for no reason and we're just a chemistry experiment and survival of the fittest and genetic evolution and mutations and so on, or we are here for a reason. So that's the first question. So I'm going to guess you're in the latter camp, that you believe we are here for a reason.
Yeah.
And I assume that's because you have this sense that you talked about, this you call human nature. I don't know how to describe it, but you have this sense that there is a purpose, that it's not just a random act of chemistry. And I'm wondering, if you think in your conversation with executives and other people and your experience in your life, you feel that that most people have this sense. Do you think that's a kind of a universal sense that people have?
I do. And I think that comes from people just want to matter. Simply, they just want to know that they've made a difference somewhere, somehow. With the executives, as they are, you don't become an executive just overnight. You have to build towards that. You have to make all these decisions about, I want to be a CEO, and you have to do the hard things. So your focus is on shareholder value and growth and all these things that to build a business and to build a legacy. That sometimes is incongruent to your personal need to for that significance. So
How do your executives respond when you bring them into that realm? When you move away from branding and marketing and all that, and you get them into that personal realm, how do they respond?
Very uncomfortably, because their value and their identity is tied to their position, to their output, to their title, to their desk. So when we talk about, okay, well, if you leave, what happens to all of that stuff? And it becomes very uncomfortable because, as I've said, they've spent so many years building their own narrative, building their own legacy. And if that goes away, then who are they?
Who are they?
I experienced this, after when Enid and I, we talked about me being at Bridgestone. I got to a point where, at no fault of Bridgestone, I just had my Jerry Maguire moment. I had to, I wrote my own manifesto and I said, I've got to leave. And again, there was no fault of the company. And so I decided to start my own business. When I started my own business, I realized that all those people who were there to say, hey, if you start your own business, I'll be there to support you. I'm by your side. The first month of my business, I sat there thinking, what did I do? Because my value, my identity, my credentials, everything was tied into a position that I walked away from. And so now I had to build from the very beginning and build that up again. So when I talk to executives about, is this really who you want to be? Is this aligned with what you feel is your purpose? And they're sensing that, well, not really. Then they're like, okay, well, if I leave, I'm back to just being Steve. I'm not CEO Steve.
Right.
And that's very uncomfortable.
And so so at that point, do they say, do they get it? Say, okay, I need to build a persona, not based on my title and my position. Is that their next, I'm sure you help them with that. Is that the idea to create that alternate persona that is not dependent on their achievement, let's say?
Well, I am not a life coach, and I'm not an executive coach who will help walk them through all of that. I mean, really the lane that I'm in right now is just helping them name that tension, to validate the fact that they're feeling something and it's worth leaning into. It's worth discovering. It's worth reflecting, and to figure out why they're feeling this and if it's truly part of their journey from what they built into what they're built for.
Yeah. Well, let's tell our listeners that you're not going to hear Enid anymore today because unfortunately her internet crashed. And so she has just sent me a text with her condolences. But Steve and I we're going to continue and finish up here in a few minutes. But, one of the things, Steve, that you said was earlier is about these seasons, this evolution through these different seasons, that looking to find meaning and purpose, which is really what Enid and I talk about every week.
Yeah.
When I mentioned before that it's peculiar that we are kind of dumb when we're young and older, and smarter at the end when we're older, it seems to be backwards. It kind of nicely dovetails into what you're talking about, that we need to have this experience, as you described earlier. We need to go through those experiences. If we tell somebody when they're 20, oh, by the way, here's a book, or even when they're 15, here's a book, read this book. This is life. This is what you're supposed to do. Now go ahead and do it. That wouldn't work. Life is experiential. We have to. Now, why? Why is life experiential? It seems crazy. It's dangerous. It's dangerous to have life experiential. Things could happen. You could, get hit by a bus. You could have, some terrible thing happen to you. I used to joke that it's amazing to me that anybody ever leaves their bedroom. The world can be dangerous, right? But it's when you realize why you're here, that you're learning, you're evolving. And I like to say to me, and I always say to people, I'm not trying to sell you anything. You're welcome to believe what you want. But to me, the evidence, the things we're talking about point to that life, that we are here for a reason. And that reason, you said, to live a life, to live a human life, basically, to experience a life. And I think it's because, and I like to say life is preparation. We're doing this for a reason. It's not just this random thing. You're dumb when you're young for a reason. You experience things for a reason. You reach the end and you go, oh, I sort of get it now, right? Oh, I wish I had known this when I was earlier. But as you said, you probably wouldn't have listened.
Yeah.
And so this idea of life as preparation is very powerful. I can't prove it. I have no evidence. I don't know what happens next. But I think the clues and exactly what you're talking about lead us to a conclusion that, if we're here for a reason, and that reason is to make this evolution to be less focused on ourselves and more focused on others, because as you said, that's where the joy is. To me, that's the biggest clue. We love doing that.
Yeah.
Then all these things point to life being preparation and us to be here for a reason. And I think your particular experience is just so emblematic or so perfect for this metaphor, because you've lived it and you are living it. And just to listen to you talk about the fact that you left a position, you left your identity, trying something else. This is really what this is all about. So I think, people listen to Enid and I every week. They're sick of us. But when we get somebody like you on, right, who's doing this every day, you're taking care of your mother, you've evolved in your career and personally, I think that you're a great example of exactly the kind of things we're talking about.
Yeah. You had asked, why do I feel that we have to go through these seasons? Or, if someone had given us a book, two people can go through the very same experience and come out with two different viewpoints and marching orders from that experience. So if we were all given the book of life, here is how things are supposed to be. Here's how to live loving each other and not starting wars and all these other things. One, we all wouldn't read the book, and we would come out with that something different. I mean, you and I can go to the very same movie, same experience, and come out with two completely different takeaways. And that's because of our experience, our mindset, what we've been through. You've been through things that I haven't been through, and vice versa. So that's where the meeting someone where they are, back to the volunteering, back to us giving ourselves and thinking outwardly, it allows us to see other people's viewpoints and to be able to take that and to figure out, what to do with that and how to apply it to our own lives.
Here we are in this very divisive nation. Now, Enid and I have a rule. I have a rule: no politics on the podcast. And it's not just because, as Michael Jordan says, Republicans buy sneakers too. Why cut off half your listenership? But that's not really the reason, because we're not doing this for a living. We're not making any money on a podcast. But but the reason I don't want to talk about politics is because it misses what I consider the point about things you're talking about, why we're here. And that's what the aerial view is all about. It's another perspective to understand that as you said earlier, that we are here for a limited time, that all history repeats itself, that human experiences repeat itself. There's not a single emotion or experience you have had in your life that billions of other people haven't had, right? These are universal themes. The story of life doesn't change, just the set changes.
Yeah.
And I think you're spot on that you have to go through these experiences. And I love that you said you would have paid no attention when you were younger. So I think your message is resonates very well. And we unfortunately or maybe fortunately, this is an audio only podcast. We don't do video. My wife told me at the beginning, after seeing the first episode, she said, I think you should just do audio. So anyway, but I can see you, and I can see you have and by the way, Steve and I have not met before we're doing this interview. Enid and Steve know each other a long time, but I'm looking at this gentleman, and he has a certain calm, a certain peacefulness about him. And that tells me a lot about this evolution that you've made personally. And I think is just really, like I said, a great example of what we really want to do in our lives. Yes, we don't know how many days we have. We don't know when the end is coming. We don't know what our physical condition is going to be. But I think the fact that you have focused your life now on recognizing that we're here for a reason, that helping other people is the key, what we talk about all the time. Mm-hmm. It's nice to hear somebody else say it besides Enid and me. So at any rate, unfortunately, we lost Enid. Her internet crashed. I feel terrible because I know how much she was looking forward to this. So we're going to wrap up. Usually Enid reads something she has written, read somewhere, or something you have read. And unfortunately, I am not prepared to do that, but I want to just thank you so much for taking this time with us. I think we should probably do this again if that'd be okay with you.
Absolutely.
Steve, would you also tell people about your podcast? Tell them the name of it. And
Yeah. So the podcast is called Crafted Clarity. And the podcast is about helping leaders and others distill the tension between what we built and what we built for. So what we built is our lives, our businesses, our careers, our family. We built all that, but we get to a point in our lives where we need to figure out, as we just talked, what's it all for? Why am I built the way I am? So it's all around the metaphors of whiskey. So back in 2020, when we were all finding new hobbies, I found whiskey, not so much as a drink of choice, but because I just fell in love with the process of distillation. You take yeast and water and grains and you turn it into something incredible, but there's a whole process of taking those raw materials and becoming what you see on the shelves, aging and time and pressure and loss. So there's a lot of life metaphors in the whiskey making process. So it's not whiskey heavy. So if you don't drink whiskey, you don't know anything about it, you might learn a few things. It's not over your head. It just brings a little bit of depth to the conversation. And again, it's really just about meeting people in this tension of, hey, I just lost my job and I can't find a new job. What am I supposed to be doing in this moment? So we have new podcasts every Thursday. They're also on YouTube. You can find all the information, all the links at craftedclarity.net. That's the website. You can get to Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff. They're all posted there. And you can reach me through there, and more than happy to talk to anyone who is in this position in their life where they're just trying to figure out, okay, Mark and Enid, you helped me get to the aerial view. Now I'm changed. What do I do next? Okay. The next
have
thing,
some whiskey.
I've got some whiskey. Pull up a chair. We'll have a conversation.
That's great.
But the idea is you help people pull up to the aerial view, but then inevitably we have to go back down to the street view.
Absolutely.
I want them to be changed after you pull them up. I want them to go back to the street view to have a different viewpoint on the humanity that we all share.
Yeah, well, that's perfect. I agree. We do live in the street view. People say to me, "Well, the stuff you're talking about is out there," and I go, "No. It's just to help you do exactly what you said. You need to take it from the aerial view into the street view." Steve, I can't thank you enough. You are a great guy, very interesting guy. Anybody who meets you, I'm sure, wants to be your friend right away. You have that aura about you, and now I know. Yeah, and the whiskey. Now I know why Enid was so anxious to have you on our show. I hope we will do this again. I thank you very much for taking the time. And everybody, for Enid, I will say goodbye. Thank you all for listening. She always says peace, and I always say see you next time. Take care.
All right.